everyone. Welcome back to Field Stories. I am Chris Catola, joined by our new guest host from the Suriname boy band, Unlock Nature Tours. It's Nicholas Smith. Wow, we're so honored to have the member of the newest pop band joining us.
Well, firstly,
wow,
Chris, if you ever call me Nicholas again, I'm never doing the podcast. So that's the first thing I'd say.
Why did you say that? You know I'm going to do this again now. That was a tactical error, dude. Really.
It's my first and last as that name.
All right. So all the girls get Nicholas tattooed on their breasts. Then is what you're saying, yeah? For all the girls,
of course.
Well, yeah. Well, man, it's been a long time, as we can tell by your hair. And
the biggest
I guess before we get into anything else about the episode, I don't know when we're going to see again, because right now you're up and down and traveling, so you never know if the schedules are going to line up. So just give us a quick overview check-in on how you're doing, where you're at, what it's been like over there.
Yeah, sure. Well, it's been ages, hasn't it? It's probably been more than 6 weeks. So I've been here for, 4.5. So yeah, I'm in Suriname. I'm with Dick Locke, who was one of our OG guests back in the day. And basically to put context to that, so how that came about is I hadn't really heard of Suriname too much. I knew where it was, but I didn't know anything about it. And Dick came on the podcast, a friend of Chris, and the way he was talking about it, I was like, I've got to get out here. I was like, wow, all of the things he was talking about, all the the spider monkey project, the anacondas they're catching, and I'm like, I've got to get out here. And so to say it was worth it is an understatement. It's incredible out here. I mean, this place is wonderful. The abundance of wildlife is just mesmerizing. I've never been to a place which has so many animals everywhere. I mean, it's 93% rainforest, greenest country in the world. And you can tell, I mean, as soon as you cross the border, basically I started off in Guyana, crossed the border via ferry. It's just green. The whole drive to the city was just greenery, forest, everything. It was mind-blowing. And to say I was introduced kindly by the wildlife here, again, another understatement. Because on my first morning, after I'd settled in, so I had an evening, settled in the first morning, went down to the pier at the lodge here, and I was just filming away, and I was filming these, I actually found out later they're four-eyed fish, but they're basically like mud skippers, right? And I'm filming them, and I'm like, oh, that's a cool snake. comes into view. And within my first morning, I'm filming a predation sequence of a cabela, which is a mangrove snake, eating these one of the mudskipper like fish. And I was like, wow, it doesn't get much better than this, does it? Surely. And so in the afternoon, I'm just tucking into some food, some local roti, which is incredible. It's the best food I've had. It's just amazing. I do have roti in Peru as well.
No, we never have it at all, but I've had it, and it is amazing. I know that part of South America has amazing food.
It's incredible. Anyway, so this is what makes it hard, because I'm there eating my food with friends and made here, and Dick shouts down from up on the balcony. He says, "Hey man, do you want to finish your food, or do you want to come catch an anaconda with me?" And I'm like, man, it's my first day, and I'm like, it's such a hard decision because this food's damn good, but he was like, right, we gotta go, like go now. So he's like, you gotta drop everything and come. I was like, oh man. So I just quickly ran, got my camera in. We drove nearly an hour up to this place where this anaconda was, because you remember from the podcast, he does snake calls here in Suriname, and we turn up, and there's an anaconda which is swallowing down an iguana in the middle of this field right next to someone's home, basically. And it was our job to move it, but we felt guilty in moving it because it was in a perfect location. It was had a nice big pond, and it was backed onto some more not jungle, but terrain that it could survive in. And we had to move it, so we took the anaconda away. Obviously, it dropped the iguana, and we put the anaconda in the bucket, and then the iguana we placed in the bucket too with it, because it's already dead. We might as well chuck that in there. And then I'm in the back of the vehicle, we're driving back. I've got a beer in hand, my arm on an anaconda, basically on the bucket of an anaconda, and then it just starts bucketing down with rain, like absolutely pissing down with rain. And the city, like it turns into basically a river, like a massive river through the city because it can't take the load from the rain. So I'm like, I'm there with a beer, an anaconda next to me, and we're basically driving through a river in the main city in Suriname. And I'm like, this is my first day. I was like, welcome to the country. And I'm like, this is
Yeah.
insane. I was
Well,
like, what is this?
it sounds insane. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
well, I mean, I feel like we may have to have you on after your trip to Suriname and in
I
your
think
upcoming
so,
trip
to
to
be honest.
Uganda. We may have to have you as sort of a guest, so to speak,
That'll
to
be
share
fun,
more of
man.
these
That'll be
stories with
fun.
us. So yeah, I think we'll do that, but keep collecting them. And again, you're coming. When do you go to Uganda? You go in what, a month, 2 weeks? What is?
The 28th, so 10 days. So I
Yeah.
drop into
So
London for one night, stay with Ellis, who's our new
yeah,
editor.
yeah.
And I stay there for a night, and then I'm out to Uganda. So yeah, it's all
Wow.
go.
So
It's
I
all
mean,
go. So
world traveler, so it's amazing. So yeah, we'll have to, whenever we can catch you, we'll have to try to, maybe in October you'll finally have a little more
it'll
time
be
and
a
we
lot
can
of fun. Can I
catch up.
quickly tease the shitting and sicking dog on a kayak 4 hours away from civilization? That's a
I
story
mean,
we'll have to talk about another time, but I want to tease
yeah,
that.
that sounds like maybe that's your field story on the episode where we talk about what you've been
I think
doing.
it
That
will
sounds
be,
good.
man. That was
That
chaos.
sounds good. That sounds good.
Cool.
Until something crazier happens in Uganda. So,
Yeah, right. Anyway, man.
anyways,
Yeah, enough about
that
me,
was a
dude.
nice little
What's
preview. But today we actually have an awesome guest on the show. You're joining us as a co-host today, not the guest, even though I think you could probably fill the episode. Yeah, today we have Miriam Boucher on the episode, and yeah, she's actually someone that I've spoken to off and on for the last few years. She's an awesome herpetologist. With a big focus on crocodilians, actually, which of course, as
That's
everyone
cool.
knows, is near and dear to my heart. And actually, she's doing her PhD in the same university that Hallie Cowan is doing her master's in.
Hey.
So it's all a small little world, right?
That's
But I
so
actually knew
cool. I love
Miriam
it.
before I ever knew Hallie, so it really is a small world.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, I can hardly wait to speak to her today. It's going to be awesome. She's done amazing work. Yeah, she's got a lot of things to share with us. So I think it's going to be a
Brilliant.
great episode. And yeah, I can't wait to get to it. So let's
Yeah.
go.
Let's do it. I look forward to it.
All right. So everyone, thanks for tuning in as always. And yeah, our guest this week is Miriam Boucher. And I'm assuming I pronounced that right, the last name. Because it's like a French-Canadian last name. So yeah. So yeah, thank you again for joining us, Miriam. It's awesome to have you on the show. We've chatted a bit off and on over the last, I guess, 5 or 6 years now. Usually came in questions and related questions. And yeah, I've also really admired the work you've been doing and sort of what I've seen on social media and also some of the other work you've been doing. It's gotten out in papers and publications. So yeah, it's really awesome. It's an awesome opportunity to speak to you and a pleasure to speak to you in person, so to speak, digitally this way. And yeah, I'd love to know more about your work and your background, and sort of if you want to introduce yourself a bit to our listeners and viewers, it would be awesome.
Sure. Thanks for having me on, guys. I really appreciate it. Yeah, you and I have a little bit of shared heritage in that we're both Canadian.
This is true.
I've always, growing up, I was a city kid, but I always loved herps, and my number one was crocodilians. When I was like in first grade, I wrote down, in my mind, a crocodilian biologist was Steve Irwin. So I wrote down like, I want to be a crocodilian biologist or a hognose snake researcher. That was it. It was that or bust.
Wow. So specific.
That makes me feel like I'm back in Ontario as well. Hognose snake researcher. I love
Right?
it. It's great.
So somehow I managed to kind of pull off both of those in some aspects. So I have managed to do all of my degrees down in the US. Right now I'm doing my PhD at Clemson University with the James C. Kennedy Waterfowl and Wetlands Center. And but my work has taken me all over the place. I did work for quite a few years in Belize with American crocodiles and Morlet's crocodiles, and dabbled with Cayman in Nicaragua. And now I'm doing a big alligator project where I'm collecting information on alligator diet and then contaminants of emerging concern all across the Southeast. So we're doing 8 states, and we're looking at microplastic and forever chemicals and kind of exploring alligators as potential biomonitors for those contaminants in wetland systems. But I am just your regular everyday biologist. I love to be dirty. I like to explore and just have fun doing it.
Yeah, no, I mean that's awesome. I mean, I'm curious. Sort of, I think we've had this question a couple times with some of our guests. I mean, yeah, I could give you all the reasons I love crocodilians, but I'm curious what sort of drew you to them in particular, especially for someone younger, and growing up in Canada, like, to be honest, I can understand, you grew up in Louisiana or Florida, and they're there and you see them. But yeah, I mean, I think we both can testify to the fact you don't exactly see crocodilians in Lake Ontario, kicking around in Canada. So yeah, what drew you to them? What's the, and still draws you to them?
I love everything about them, but I think what I found really impressive about them is they are quiet confidence. They're just so perfectly tuned to their habitat, and they're really understated in a lot of ways. People want to always paint them with the broad brush of being aggressive or being dangerous, but there's a lot more nuance to them. And I think that's what I like best about them, is that they look dangerous and they look intimidating, but at the end of the day, there's just so much more to them. They're vocal, have personalities, they're intelligent, and I think I like that complexity about them and the fact that it's not as broadcast as some other animals.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with that. I mean, I think they are so, you're right. You can view them on such a simplistic level, but there's so much to them. And I'm glad you highlighted personalities and intelligence, and they're just so, I mean, that's the thing for me. I'm sure you feel the same when you go out to do a survey and the survey involves capturing, if that's part of the methodology. It's such a challenge because they're just so smart. Like, they're just so intelligent, and trying to work with that. And obviously they're big, and I think people focus on the big part and the danger part and whatever, but the intelligence part and the personality part and the response to stimulus part is what makes me love them. You're right. There's so much more that meets you out of them. So yeah, it's cool to hear similar things from someone. I think anybody who works them enough falls in love with them.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Oh, nice. I just want to quickly ask about, the contaminants in the water, or the crocodilians themselves. I wouldn't mind knowing a little more about that. I'm kind of curious, especially maybe what you found out, or at least what you can say that you found out at this point.
Right. So I think one thing to note about contaminants and when you're dealing with wildlife is people like to use the term indicator species, and you usually select indicator species for using different kind of characteristics. One, that they're accessible, that they're numerous, that they are either long-lived or fast reproducing, and that they're resident. And when we think about contaminants in crocodilians, one thing to note is, unlike a lot of other species, high levels of contamination don't necessarily kill or damage crocodilians. They're very resilient. And so in some ways, they're not the best indicator species. But what that means is that they're great biomonitors. So they accumulate and bioaccumulate contaminants from the environment. And so they can kind of be a good mirror for what that looks like over a large time frame. And so although it's not a direct comparison, when we think about human lifespans and a crocodilian's lifespan, they're pretty similar. And in a lot of places, we use the same aquatic resources that they do. And so that's kind of like the background of why I'm interested in looking at this in alligators. And there's a big body of work that's been done in the US for certain kinds of contaminants in alligators. But the forever chemicals, PFAS, that's still coming forward. And then nobody's looked at microplastics yet. And so we're in the process of going through these microplastic samples, but some of the few preliminary ones that we ran, we were able to recover. We have this analyzer that analyzes the plastics that are microscopic for us. And the sample that we had, 26%, was ABS plastic, which is tire wear particles. So they're picking up from runoff from roadways, they're picking up those tire particles. And tire particles most recently have gained a lot of attention because they have a certain kind of chemical in them that can cause death in fish. And so kind of finding some interesting results already. And then we're also looking at mercury as a legacy contaminant. And I've been really, I guess, encouraged to see from last year's data that we got from North Carolina, South Carolina, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas, that there's not really anything too startling about mercury levels, which is kind of nice and shows that some of that contamination that was originally quite prolific in the southeastern US from coal burning power plants has started to diminish a little bit, which is kind of neat. And I'm still working on all the PFAS stuff, but we're finding it, and when we're finding some of it in high levels, I just don't have anything really to give you there yet. I'm still working on the
that's
data.
fair enough. No worries.
Yeah, no, that's super cool. Yeah, that's really awesome. That's super cool. I know obviously we're still, it's a slow process, but we're still in the process down here in Peru working on a project in our sort of river, our area, about mercury levels and hard metals, and some of the came in here as well. So it's everything you said resonates with us. It's down here in Peru as well. So really, really cool, awesome. I wanted to ask you as well. Maybe you can explain a little bit more about. I guess I don't know how recent it was. It was the last year or so that you sort of pioneered a technique in holding the mouths open. I mean, you can explain me a bit more about the pressure that crocodilians generate with their mouths, which is insane, especially bigger species, and then the difficulties in having to get in there to do work, to examine them for various reasons. Maybe you could elaborate more on why you need to get into the mouth of crocodilians in some cases for research, and then also the method, the technique you've sort of pioneered to do that.
Right. Yeah, that's been a kind of fun side quest that's come about from this. So there was some work done in the early 2010s quantifying bite forces in crocodilians. And so there's kind of two areas of the mouth where bite force originates. One is molar form, which is at the back of their mouth. So if you're thinking about it from a biomechanical perspective, that's the point with the greatest leverage. So for some of those species like the estuarine crocodile, they're generating, upwards of 6,000 pounds of force at the back of their mouth and up to 3,000 at the front. So, it's like you're dropping a very big truck on your toe, and that's what they're generating in their jaws, which is
It's unbelievable.
terrifying. You don't want to get your hands in there. And then depending on, and depending on what their jaw shape is like, so obviously those longer, slender jawed species don't produce nearly the same amount of power. But there's a technique that can be used on live crocodilians to get stomach contents, which is where you prop their mouth open and you pull down they've got this kind of cartilaginous flap at the back of their throat that keeps water from going down. So you pull that down and you can actually stick a lubricated hose down into their stomach and pump water in their stomach until it fills up. Because they don't have a diaphragm like us, you just keep pumping water in, and eventually that stomach sphincter muscle will kind of relax and you'll get a backflow of stomach contents. It's called gastric lavage. And so conventionally, folks usually just
Quite the name. That's quite the name.
Amazing name.
Sounds like something in equestrian. Gastric lavage. That's great.
That's right.
But anyways,
yeah. I'm sticking to my French-Canadian roots on that.
Yeah, really. That's great. Yeah.
So usually, conventionally, people use what's close at hand, which ends up being PVC pipe. So you cut a section of PVC pipe. It could be, 3 inches in diameter, which is, like 10 centimeters or something like that in diameter. You can get different diameters, and you put that in their mouth. But when you have this hard pipe, you can't really move freely within the mouth. So it depends on what you're doing. If you're doing lavage, it can be hard to access the back of the mouth. If you're looking for parasites or looking at doing dental surgeries, if you're a veterinarian, it's a little bit limiting. And it's also made of plastic. And I wanted to try to limit as much as I could plastic in my methodology. And so a friend at the Dallas World Aquarium, Luis Sigler, made this fixed design kind of square prop that he used in a couple crocodiles for dental surgery. And I asked him if he'd send me what he did. And I ended up going to the hardware store and buying some steel mending plates and some threaded rod and creating this square device with cross pieces that could be adjusted in height to put into the mouths. And I used my original design for a little bit, and on an 8-foot gator, it started to bend. I went, might need to scale this up just a little bit. And so I reached out to the machine shop at Clemson, and one of the guys there looked at my design and said, well, here you go. Like, just, you need this kind of steel plate and whatever. And so we created this thing that has these specialized nuts on it, so you can raise it and lower it. And it's made of metal. I put a little cushion on there for the teeth, but essentially we use that to hold the mouth open, and we can dial it up so we can see parasites in the back of the throat or leeches. I use it for lavage, and I put my faith in it before testing it, and I feel better about it now after we tested it. But we put it in a mechanical press. The first one can withstand about 1,100 pounds of force. That's the medium duty, and then I have a heavy duty one that does over 4,000 pounds of force, which is enough to support the jaw pressure of even the biggest recorded estuarine crocodiles from Southeast Asia and Australia. So I feel a lot better about sticking my hand in there now.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. That's so cool.
I have a question. Firstly, how easily you just say the word lavage in conversation without it really amazes me. But that was really, really great insight. It's fascinating stuff. What are the sort of biggest crocodilians, that you'd be working with? I'm definitely curious on some sizes, because you've mentioned 8 foot, but then maybe you've worked with larger. I'm just because I think there's a bit of a misconception. I think we've probably talked about it on the podcast, but with how like length, people assume that as something gets, like a crocodilian gets larger or longer, it's sort of proportionally larger. But as we know, some of the bigger reptiles, as they get a bit longer, they get way larger. So I'm certainly curious on some of the larger species you've worked with.
Right. So here, the alligators are probably like the biggest overall species that I've worked with. The American crocodiles will get long, but not quite as stout or heavy until they get really large, like over 13 feet in length. They stay kind of slim. But here, the American alligators, when they start getting over 10 feet, and depending on where they're at and what the habitat's like, they can put on a lot of weight. So for our lavage, we generally don't do alligators that are larger than like 10 and a half feet, because then you get into, they weigh about 300 pounds, and you have to get them up on a spine board. And they also take a lot of water to stomach flush. But we do catch all sizes of alligators, including ones that are larger than that, because I can still pull blood from them. And I use a biopsy punch to take like a little plug of skin and muscle from the side of the tail to look at contaminants in edible tissues, because alligators are harvested legally and eaten here in the US. So blood is a great predictor for certain contaminants, but maybe less applicable to the human health aspect. But yeah, we've gotten some 12-foot alligators, and they weigh 500 pounds, and it takes all you've got to get them out of the water.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, no, it's I need to come up and work with you one day. I would love to take one of those on. It'd be so cool. But maybe we can talk. Maybe I can come and join you and Hallie one day doing that. I would be a dream. That'd be awesome.
That'd be so good.
Yeah. The biggest caiman I've got down here is like just under 3 meters. But I would love to take on something a little bigger. That'd be awesome. But anyways, that's enough about me. I wanted to sort of transition from that response, that question kind of leads into, I guess, more of a serious type topic is, let's just cut to the chase. Like when we think about crocodilians and people work with crocodilians, it's a macho field. It's a guy field, like traditionally. And obviously people such as yourself and Hallie and actually lots of other amazing researchers out there are thankfully breaking that trend and showing that it doesn't matter who you are, anyone, any color, any sex, anyone, period, can do this. But I'm curious. I mean, I don't know. I would assume maybe it's been difficult for you. Maybe you faced some assumptions and stigmas out there. Like to think you didn't, but you probably have. So, I mean, if you want to elaborate on that and share some of that with us, it'd be really awesome to hear that.
Good question.
Yeah, definitely. I think trying to get my foot in this field was a little bit hard when I finished my undergrad and I started looking for opportunities. I think I got passed up because on paper, they ask you, oh, can you lift 50 pounds? It's like, yeah, I can. No problem. But
Yeah, that's 50 pounds.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well,
if you have a male candidate and then you have a female candidate, sometimes you get passed up. But my biggest thing was when I'd show up in Belize to do croc stuff and people would look at me and go, are you going to do, like, what are you doing here? Like, are you going to do that? And just kind of having to prove myself over and over again, every new situation, show people that I'm capable. And I still do it to this day with the project that I'm doing. You tell people that you're going to come down and this is what you want to do. And there's always some kind of skepticism or a little bit of doubt. And the best thing that I can do is I just come down and I be myself and I be prepared. And I'm usually the dirtiest and the stinkiest by the end of it. And so within short order, most people will get on board and they're happy to have me. But it definitely is something that that I've dealt with. But I think, have a little bit of privilege in that area because I'm a little bit of a taller woman. I'm a little bit have an athletic build. And so I know that some of my friends who are more on the petite side of things, who are just as capable as I am, get a lot more pushback than I do in a lot of cases. So I have been, I think, luckier on that aspect. Usually when I walk up, there's a little bit less doubt when they see me walk up. But it's like that constant treadmill of having to kind of prove yourself. But what I've been encouraged by and what helped me get going in this field is that another woman, Dr. Marissa Taya, has created some space for me to come up, which I think is super important and something that I hope that I'm contributing to now. I'm trying, and also kind of hope to be carrying that on. I think that's the biggest thing that we can do once we get ourselves established, is create a foothold for somebody else. I've been lucky to do that.
Great. Actually, it's funny that you mentioned Marissa, because I think I'm going to reach out to her, bring her on as a guest in the future as well, because I know Hallie loves her, and obviously you mentioned, so I'd love to get her on as well. So, and actually, it's funny, you just literally sort of answered the question I was just going to follow up with, which is whether there was anyone in the field that you sort of felt had maybe broken ground or made it more of a safe space for you, because I mean, I would assume for someone starting out in the past, it probably just wasn't as much. So, but yeah, no, it's great. And I do think that, obviously her and then you and then Hallie and all the other great female researchers out there, I mean, thank God, are showing that anybody can do this. So that's awesome. Like, fantastic for all of you. Super, super cool. Awesome.
Yeah. I've been really lucky.
Yeah, definitely.
No, go ahead, Nick, if you have a question. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were going to a question. Sorry, we just had a bit of a lapse of concentration there.
Sorry.
We often, anyway. Basically, I just wanted to ask you my favorite question. I ask it very often. Where do you see yourself going with this job, and is there anywhere else you would like to do your research? Because you mentioned the big salties over in Southeast Asia or South Asia, or where just Asia in general, and Australia, but obviously there's some big crocodiles in Africa too. I'm just curious where you see yourself going, and if there's any dream locations.
Well, what I think and what I hope to be able to do is, I think when it comes to crocodilian work, there's so many great local researchers in lots of countries, and what I'd love is to be able to maybe take my experience after this with contaminants and with that work and help create a pipeline to help other researchers in other countries that are doing stuff with crocodilians access resources abroad to do projects that they want to do. So whether that's with an NGO or something else, work to help bring other people's science up and equip them. I love solving problems scientifically, but when it comes down to the work that's happening in other places, you have to be boots on the ground there. And so I'd love to be able to kind of work this and leverage the experience and the access that I have to be able to help mobilize resources for people to do what they want to do. And as for me, chasing the biggest isn't necessarily my interest. I would love to just go work with people who work in the most remote and far out places. That would be amazing for me. I'd love to go to West Africa and crawl around in caves and see, African dwarf crocodiles. Or I would love as well to go in person to India or Nepal and learn about their success and the program that they put together for gharial, because they've been so incredibly successful. And that success has come from leveraging what goes on in the local communities and equipping those people to do the monitoring and the research themselves. And I'd love to just go and learn from them and see their work and witness all of the effort and all of the success that they've had.
No, that's awesome.
Yeah, amazing answer.
This is just a really quick, it's not a full question, just a quick one I have to ask. I mean, I think Hallie and myself both share a passion for the dwarf crocodilians, whether it's the Paleosuchus or whether it's dwarf crocodiles. I'm curious with you. I mean, I know this is a hard question, and maybe there's one you haven't seen in person that might change your mind when you see it. But at the moment, do you have a species that is your favorite that you sort of like the most?
I do. I love the American crocodile. I think for me, it's like they're like the black cats. They got black cat energy. So
Okay.
they're shy, they're secretive. You have to work hard to get close to them. I mean, in Belize, here, I drive on an impoundment with a truck and I see alligators and we catch them. Like
Yeah.
in Belize, my bread and butter was I get out of the boat and I go swim up and I get them, or I go out and I go walking, looking in the mangrove because you're 100 yards away and they go down. And I just really, they're understated and they're kind of quiet crocodilians. I don't think they get as much attention as they deserve, but I also spend a lot of time watching them and doing behavioral observations.
Yeah.
And again, they're just really nuanced and I just think they're beautiful and I love them.
Awesome.
I could
No,
change
that's great. Awesome answer. Yeah, no, that's super cool. Yeah, no, that's awesome. Thank you for that. Really enjoyed that. I think we both have more questions, but yeah, let's go ahead and save those questions for a future interview, which I'm sure we'll have you on again. Let's go ahead and switch to probably one of many stories that you would have, but I know you teased me with one story. I think you said from Belize that you might want to share with us today. So yeah, let's go ahead and hit it with your field story.
All right. So this is the one and only time I have been most afraid in my life. So this is, okay. I've done a lot of work with crocodilians and I have never had any really crazy close calls or anything like that. I don't ever want to get bit. That's my goal. But this is a story that really recalibrated my respect for crocodiles. So in Belize, the transit system isn't the best. So to get to this site, you have to take a 3-hour bus ride to the south of the country. And then you get on a boat and you take a boat up the coast to this really remote area. And we were working with a group called called TIDE, Toledo Institute for Development and Environment. And we were going to survey this really remote location on one of their protected areas. And so we picked up a 12-foot canoe. We put it on a side-by-side. We drove through an hour through the savannah. And then we put it on the ground and we drug it an hour through the jungle. And then there's this one place where it widens out and it's all forested. And it's just this thin little kind of lake. And the rangers there were joking with us. They're like, oh yeah, there's a 15-foot crocodile in the lake. And we take that always with a grain of salt because it's hard sometimes to estimate length on crocodilians. And I was like, yeah, no worries. And I had two people with me. One was a guy from France and the other was a visiting master's student from Norway who was collecting blood samples. And so the plan was to go out and do an eyeshine survey with the canoe and then catch afterwards. And I kind of gave them a rundown. When you catch from canoes, it's a different ball game. Like, we got to make the calls. We can't bring anything big on the canoe. But anyways, we go out just as it's falling dark and we start paddling down to the end of this little lake to get ourselves set up. And right away, right off the bat, there's like a 9-foot crocodile at the surface, just kind of like floating along. And I'm thinking to myself pretty smugly, like, oh, this is going to be a good night. We're going to have a good time. It'll be easy. And as we're getting down to the end of this lake, I see this ripple on the surface and I'm like, what's that? And then that ripple became a wake. And as my brain is turning, I'm like, is that an otter? because it's creating this bow wake. And then I'm like, oh no, no, that's a crocodile. And this croc was steaming towards us on the surface of the water. And then I'm calmly thinking to myself, no big deal, crocodiles don't bother us. He probably doesn't know that we're people. So I start banging on the side of the canoe going, hey, like, back off. And to no avail, this croc's steaming towards us. And as it's getting closer, I'm starting to process that, like, this thing is longer than our boat and it's wider than our boat. And so I'm sitting at the front of the canoe on my knees. I'm looking at this happening and it won't stop and it's not stopping. So I tell the guys, stop paddling. And this croc comes up and I'm looking at it and its head is wider than the canoe where I'm sitting. And it comes up and it touches its nose to the front of the canoe. And I sit back. And the Norwegian guy was sitting behind me and he goes, I knew that we were in trouble when you sat down. And in my head, I'm already processing. I'm like, all right, I'm going to be in the water. I have to save myself. And then I have to save these two guys that are with me. And at that moment, the crocodile lifted his head out of the water, looked me dead in the eye, and slammed his head down on the water beside the canoe, like a huge territorial head slap, like wham! We're holding onto the railings of the canoe. We're tipping back and forth. And then it comes back up to the surface and it looks me dead in the eye and then goes down. And I just was like, message received, sir. And I told the guys, I'm like, turn around. This is his end of the lake. We're not coming back. And that was, that was my most scared moment. I really, truly, in that moment, was reminded that I am at their mercy. And and also a testament to the fact that they're not, they're not out to get everybody. I mean, he could have had us in any moment, but he just didn't know what we were, and we were his length, and he said, not in my house. And I listened.
That's amazing. That's an epic story. Wow. Yeah.
Touche.
The closest encounter I've had is twice we came, well, 3 times I've come up on about 3.5 to 4 meter black caiman in the river. And twice, especially one time, particularly the first time I came up on him or her, I'm not sure, probably him. We had the big boat. So this is a big boat with an outboard motor, right? And it's like 75% as long as the boat. And it did not drop. We just came up beside, and there's no way I'm catching this thing. Clearly, I'm not pulling it out of the water in a boat alone. It's not going to happen. There's no beach. It's not going to happen. And I just looked at this thing, and it just looked up at me, and it just growled, and then it just kind of like and then just slowly dropped away. No fear, just like, you're not going to touch me, and then gone. But that's an amazing story. I can imagine what that is like, the whole experience. Obviously scary as hell, but now it's an amazing story.
Yeah.
Wow, that's epic. Absolutely. I love it. That's perfect. It's exactly the kind of story we want. Thank you for that.
What a wonderful way to end it. So good.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's perfect. Wow, that was great. I love this so much. So, I think we'll have to definitely have you on again in the future, as always.
Definitely, Miriam. Definitely.
Maybe we'll have like a Cayman woman reunion with you and Hallie.
That'd be really cool.
Sometime in the future, we'll try to schedule that. I don't know. This would be great. So, So, again, thank you so much for joining us, Miriam. This was awesome. Really, really enjoyed it, and always awesome to. I think you're the first. No, you're the second. You're the second Canadian we've had in the show. So I'm trying to keep that CanCon in the show. It's great, and. That was super cool. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll speak to you again. That was awesome.
Thank you very much. Enjoyed that a lot. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say thank you very much for coming on. That story was incredible, but also the information you gave beforehand is fascinating. I learned a new word, my new favorite word, actually. But thank you very much. It was great.
No, thank you guys very much. I really appreciate the opportunity, and for both of you, please know you're always welcome up in South Carolina if you want to come do some gator stuff.
Well, I'll take you up on that one day for sure.
If you need someone to film it, I'll be there.
Anytime you want, Nick.
Hey.
Thanks, Miriam. Take care.
Right. Bye, guys.
Ciao. All right. Well, that was awesome. I loved having her on, and great guest and crazy story. Oh my God. That was amazing. I can imagine what that would be like. And yeah, I would be scared shitless, to be honest, as well. That was quite the story. Wow.
I mean, it was just chaos. It's everything you kind of want to have happen on an excursion, but also not. Like it's great, it's adventurous, it's exciting, but that was just maybe a step far, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those. It's a great story now, but in the moment, and I
Oh,
can imagine, not to speak for her, but I would imagine that I know if I was in that position, I'd be scared for my own sake, but also like you feel responsible for the people you brought with you, and you're
yeah,
like, God,
100%.
like this is legitimately dangerous now. I mean, just to clarify for any listeners, they could have absolutely been killed. There is no
Hmm.
question on
Yeah,
that.
easy. Yeah.
And she's totally right when she says it is a great example that they're not evil. They're not trying to kill people all the time. And yeah, she's completely right. It obviously viewed the boat, the canoe, as a threat for a territorial point of view. And once it realized it wasn't territorial, it was like, all right, well, I don't really need to eat you right now, so we're gonna move on. But
Oh man.
wow, yeah, that
Yeah,
was
the
epic.
whole thing, man. The information that Miriam was giving about the gastric lavage and the other parts of I found that so interesting. But yeah, and obviously quite comedic. But yeah, the whole premise of what she's doing is extremely important. I know that I was actually there when you were doing it at this. I believe that was the sort of beginnings of the Mercury project where you were, right? Or
Yeah,
is
I mean,
it kind of in the works?
we've been collecting samples for quite a while now, and the challenge for us is well, it's a long story, but the challenge is not everything is super simple in every country about collecting samples with governments and permits. And at the moment,
Mm.
we're still a little held up by some permits to get into the final location that we want to sample, so we can actually compare our results in different types of exposure levels, I guess we'd say.
Sure.
So still held up by that a little bit, but yeah, I think when we finally get the project done, the results are going to be again really interesting. And yeah, no, I think this is all the points you made about the way that these toxins bioaccumulate is incredibly valid. And she was mentioning about the chemicals in tires, microplastics in tires, and it's
Interesting.
really interesting because, of course, depending on the species of crocodilian, fish is often a large percentage of their diet, especially when they're younger, but even as adults, depending on the species, of course. And yeah, I mean, that's classic bioaccumulation, right? I mean, going up from microbes to insects, invertebrates to fish,
Yeah.
to larger fish, to then crocodilians. And yeah, it's and that's really, it just shows you how complex everything is. Like I personally had not thought of microplastics from tires, but it makes complete sense.
Yeah,
It's
it makes so
constantly
much
there.
sense actually. No,
And yeah, it just shows you how much everything we do has an impact, right? Everything is so connected, and it's crazy. So, but I mean, also good to hear that some of the efforts to reduce, pollution, such as reduce coal mining and toxins from that, has obviously had an impact on the mercury levels in that population. So it also shows you how our actions can have such a big
yeah.
impact in a negative way, but also in the positive way if we make changes, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's a good positive message for the future that things actually, can improve for
Yeah,
sure.
absolutely. So
But yeah, ultimately a great podcast episode. It's been really fun to be back. Miriam was a good guest for me to return with. Really, really enjoyed that. It was a lot of fun, and I've actually got an episode that I've filmed here in live, in person with Dick's co-host, co-partner in his Snake Patrol Suriname, and she gave a really, really great story
awesome.
that I'd like to tease also. So, yeah, a lot of fun, which Dick also made a guest appearance for a few seconds too. So it was really fun to be here. And yeah, sorry I can't be on all the episodes all the time. I've had about 10 days at a time where there's been or 6 days at a time where there's been no signal whatsoever, being out in the jungle. So yeah, lots of fun. And yeah, like you said, accumulating stories. But Miriam, amazing guest.
Yeah,
really
no,
fun.
it's fantastic. So yeah, we'll wrap it up, and we'll see what next week holds. I'm going to be at a conference this week, and then busy the weekend traveling. And I know we should mention Michela because we forgot to mention her in the intro.
No, poor Michela.
Usually we're very busy ripping on you in the intro, but this time we kind of let Michela go. But yeah, Michela's actually just got a weekend finally back in Michigan, so seeing her family and her partner. And just giving her a very well-deserved weekend to just sort of decompress and be back home. So we'll go easy on Michela. She's definitely
we'll let her go.
And so next week we'll see whether it's Michela, whether it's me, Michela, whether it's you, Michela. Who knows what the combination?
I'm afraid.
Next week. Who knows what the treasure box will reveal by next week? But so thanks a lot for listening, everybody, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you very much.
Ciao.